start. Let me turn to the recording. So the recording is in progress. And I want to say happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I hope you remembered to get a card for your loved one. I still need to go to Publix to do that this afternoon, or I'm going to be in deep trouble. So good morning. My name is Peter Butzine. I'm appearing today on behalf of Common Cause, and joining me are others who are part of Citizens for Ethics Reform: Richard Herring, former chairman of Tallahassee's Independent Ethics Board; Ben Wilcox, representing Integrity Florida; Marilyn Wills, on behalf of Tallahassee League of Women Voters; and Catherine Baer, representing the Florida Tea Party Network. So the purpose of this press conference this morning is to draw attention to three really important issues, which will come before the Tallahassee City Commission in a workshop scheduled for this Wednesday morning, February 16th, between 10 a.m. and noon. First, we strongly support recommendations from the Independent Ethics Board to significantly reform Tallahassee's notoriously weak lobby registration and disclosure ordinance. Second, we also strongly support the Ethics Board's request for the power to grant whistleblower protections for city employees who bring complaints against city commissioners and officers. And last, we believe a majority of the commissioners were wrong in accepting the city attorney's opinion that the Independent Ethics Board does not have jurisdiction over complaints against city commissioners for actions related to their service on intergovernmental agencies, specifically CRA and Blueprint. So Ben Wilcox will next present our position supporting lobby registration and disclosure reforms. Ben?
Yes, good morning. I want to highlight the lobby reform proposals that the Independent Ethics Board is recommending to the City Commission for this workshop. At the heart of it is rewriting the definitions of lobbyists and lobbying that are currently in our city ordinance. In January 2020, the Tallahassee Democrat had a series of reports that detailed how lobbyists were working behind the scenes in city government and were refusing to register as lobbyists with the city, even though they were doing all the things a lobbyist does. They were claiming to be consultants or communications experts. Remember that if you register as a lobbyist, you have to disclose who your clients are, and that's likely the real reason they don't want to register. Last summer's federal corruption trial exposed how one unregistered lobbyist was working to win favorable public policy for his clients. This ghost lobbyist was also working to get certain people appointed to important city jobs. So as the charter requires, the Independent Ethics Board can recommend ordinances and charter amendments to the City Commission. After seeing the reports about what I'm calling ghost lobbyists, the Ethics Board went to work on a proposed ordinance to rewrite the definition of lobbyists and lobbying so that it better captures these ghost lobbyists. The current lobby registration requirement for city government is a joke. It's got a huge built-in loophole that allows these ghost lobbyists to work behind the scenes, influencing city policy for their clients. Lobbyists should not get to decide whether they want to register or not, but that's what we have with our current lobby registration requirements. The current lobby definitions are what's been described by the Ethics Board as circular. Essentially, it says you're a lobbyist if you lobby. It leaves the door open for someone to say, I'm not a lobbyist because I don't lobby, I consult or I communicate. The new proposed definitions close this loophole by describing the conduct that is associated with lobbying. I don't blame the current City Commission for putting such a weak lobby registration requirement in place. It was done under a previous commission. But I will blame this City Commission if they don't fix it by closing the lobby registration loophole and adopting the new proposed definitions. There are other lobby reform proposals from the Ethics Board that we support, including requiring lobbyists to identify the ordinance they wish to discuss with elected officials. The proposals would also require that local officials ensure that those lobbying him or her are properly registered with the Office of the Treasurer Clerk. The proposals would also require lobbyists to maintain and submit contact logs detailing their contacts with local officials. It's all meant to ensure there's more transparency when it comes to the forces that are working behind the scenes to shape and influence public policy. Now I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn Wills, who will discuss the proposal regarding whistleblower protections.
Thanks, Ben. At its December meeting, the Tallahassee Independent Ethics Board discussed the possibility of handling whistleblower complaints. At this time, all such complaints must be handled by the Office of the Inspector General, who has the sole ability to grant an employee whistleblower protection. Whistleblower complaints must be brought to the appropriate local official, a term not defined by the whistleblower statute. In Palm Beach County, both the Inspector General and the Ethics Commission were designated by the County Commission to serve as the appropriate local official. This is appropriate under state statute. Citizens for Ethics Reform supports the Ethics Board in its endeavor and urge the City Commission to extend the ability to offer whistleblower protections to the Independent Ethics Board. Only the Ethics Board is truly independent, and therefore it's appropriate that it should be able to grant whistleblower protections. Without such protection, city employees will be reluctant to call out ethics violations for fear of termination, demotion, or retribution. Thank you.
Okay, and last, Richard Herring will make our case that the Ethics Board has jurisdiction to investigate and enforce ethics violations against commissioners in their service, their ex officio service on the CRA and Blueprint. Richard?
Okay, this is an issue that has been discussed for a number of months. The Ethics Board attorney wrote a very good legal opinion saying that because the elected officials of the city made themselves the board of Blueprint and the board of the CRA, that they were still functioning as the elected officials of the city as part of their job. They're ex officio members of those boards, and that they ought to fall within the ethics requirements of the city ethics code. Now, it doesn't say anywhere on any piece of paper that the Ethics Board has jurisdiction over the boards of Blueprint and the CRA. You can't find that in writing in the law or in an ordinance or in the charter. So what we have to do is we have to do some interpretation. So the city attorney did an analysis, and basically my reading of it is the city attorney relied on two things. And the first of those is that the charter says that the Ethics Board shall have, or the city ethics ordinance shall apply to elected officials, and it also shall apply to committees and boards of the city. The city attorney tries to put those two things together to make the charter say that it applies to city elected officials when they're serving on city boards. And that's simply not what the charter says. So putting those two separate requirements together, to me, doesn't make sense. And the second thing the city attorney relies on is the state statutes under which the city commission was acting, because it's state law that gives the city commission the ability to create a CRA and the ability to do an intergovernmental body like Blueprint. And those state statutes do say that things like the CRA and Blueprint are independent bodies. They don't say, however, that those independent bodies aren't subject, or that the members serving on those independent bodies are not subject to the requirements that would otherwise apply to them as city commissioners. And so you run in, the thing that the city attorney skips over is the Florida Constitution says you can't hold two offices at the same time, and that applies to both state officials and city county officials. So the Attorney General has said, specific to CRAs, that when a city commissioner cannot also serve as a commissioner of a CRA unless the city commission declares itself to be the governing body of the CRA. So they are one and the same thing. You serve on the CRA because you're a city commissioner. When you get elected as city commissioner, the voters know they're electing you to also serve on the CRA and to also serve on Blueprint. You can't have one without the other. And as a city commissioner, as an elected city commissioner, you cannot resign from the board of this. And the Attorney General has said this also. You cannot resign from the board of the CRA without also resigning from the city commission. They go hand in hand. So we think that the voters, when they amended the city charter to require an ethics code that would cover the city commissioners as well as others, that we think they fully understood, and the intent of the voters is what really ought to control here. I can cite there are at least 3 attorney general opinions that go down this same path. But the bottom line is that it probably ought to be the intent of when you have a situation like this, where the ordinance and the law doesn't say clearly what ought to happen, that you ought to go back. If you have to interpret, you ought to go back to the intent of the voters. And we think the intent of the voters is pretty clear. We do want to applaud the positions taken by the mayor and 2 of the city commissioners. Mayor Daley's on record that he believes that the city ethics code does apply to city commissioners when they serve on the Blueprint and the CRA boards. And Commissioners Matlow and Porter supported amending the city charter to clearly state, or to clearly include within the ethics board jurisdiction these other boards. So that would be the position of the coalition, that we think that the city commission ought to recognize the authority of the city ethics board over the city commissioners when they serve on the boards of Blueprint and the CRA.
Thank you, Richard. And that last, I'm going to just turn it over to Catherine Bear for any additional thoughts, and then we will open for discussion and questions. Catherine?
I would prefer to go ahead and take the questions, and then we'll close
Okay.
out.
So does
Are there any
anybody have
questions?
any questions?
I guess I have a question, please. It's Jeff with the Democrat.
Yes, Jeff.
If the city doesn't move forward with the voter referendum as recommended by the ethics board, would you all seek to gather signatures and do that yourselves as you did in 2014, or has that been discussed at all? I don't want to.
Yeah, I would answer that. I'd say perhaps, although we believe that the position is clear, that the Independent Ethics Board does have the authority in this case, and that if any complaints come out against city commissioners for their service on CRA or Blueprint, we feel that the Independent Ethics Board has the responsibility, the duty to go ahead with those complaints. Anybody else want to add anything else from the?
I would like to go ahead and add that the ethics board has already had one complaint that has come forward against Mayor Daley, and a vote that he had on the CRA. And in addition to that, once the complaint was dismissed, the Mayor Daley actually went forward and asked the city to reimburse him for his expenses, which the city did, because he was doing he was being represented for doing his job at the CRA. There is also another complaint that the ethics board is taking up against Commissioner Matlow with, I don't remember if it was Blueprint or CRA. I'm sure Ernie Payne could better define what that was. So there is another complaint in order. So there is precedence. It's already being done. Where that goes from here, I don't know.
Another thing I would say, Jeff, is in answer to your question, I don't think that the coalition, Citizen for Ethics Reform, should be responsible for ensuring that the ethics package that we passed in 2014 with 67% voter approval, that we have the responsibility to ensure that there might be yet another petition initiative on the question that we think has already been resolved.
Okay.
Other questions? Max, did you have something?
Max put into chat, how is the meeting going to go on Wednesday? People are skeptical that it took so long to get scheduled that nothing will come from it and that it will be a political posturing by staff. Will anyone from the ethics board or the ethics officer be at the table to actually rebut points? Last time, as we all remember, Daley just yelled at Julie and Richard, and they didn't really have the ability to talk back.
Interesting point. I would invite Ernie to answer that question. My understanding is, yes, the ethics board, Dwight and probably several of the members will be at the meeting on Wednesday. But Ernie, if you'd like to unmute and answer that question on behalf of the ethics board, I would invite you to do so.
Sure. The plan is that the ethics board will be giving a presentation. The chairman, Carlos Ray, I believe the vice chair, Brian Smith, the ethics officer, Dwight Floyd, and our board counsel, John Reed, will be given more than the standard 3-minute option to speak. They'll be presenting the argument. That's pretty much it as far as the what has been promised to the ethics board. I'm not sure exactly how it'll all fall out.
Right.
But in answer to Catherine's comment earlier, excuse me, the complaint against Jeremy Matlow is in part related to his activities on the CRA board, as well as on city commission activities.
We're hopeful that, this workshop will be a, really comprehensive and thorough discussion of these ethics proposals. I would say, this has been a classic case of the city slow walking, these proposals and not, having any kind of sense of urgency that something needs to be done to, clean up our city government.
And while I believe that they truly have been slow walking it, I believe that this will be a different kind of workshop than we saw from the last time. The former ethics officer was a very toxic part of the reason why that meeting did not go as well as we would have liked, even though the board chair at that time, Richard Herring, did an amazing job of fielding questions and being able to rebut. I truly think that this will be a different kind of workshop, and it is an election year. So I think that that's going to play in on how things, I think it's really going to make a difference.
The other thing I would say is, it took a lot of prodding on our part and the Independent Ethics Board, but the city did pass sweeping reforms for the ethics ordinances that we supported a couple of years ago. And what we're asking them to do this time around is kind of finish the job, include the lobbyists and the lobby registration and disclosure reforms that we're asking for, the whistleblower reforms, and ultimately, hopefully adding the power of the ethics board to ensure that they can have the jurisdiction over city commissioners in their roles on interlocal agencies. Any other questions?
Not to be redundant, I'm sorry, but I just want to clarify. Do you all support the ethics board recommendation, the one that the chairman sent over to the city in September? One of them was to have a referendum that would expand the authority of the ethics board beyond, officers and city employees to actual lobbyists. I just want to make sure you guys,
We do support that proposal.
Okay.
I didn't mention it in my remarks just for the sake of time, but we do support that.
Okay.
We need that's the other side of the problem here with lobby registration in the city of Tallahassee, is that there's no enforcement of the registration provision.
Ben, could you repeat that sentence? You're a little bit garbled.
I said that's the other side of the problem with lobby registration in the city of Tallahassee, is that there's no enforcement of the registration requirement. And by involving the Independent Ethics Board with some oversight over lobbyists, it would provide that kind of enforcement that we need.
And remind me, is this, I'm thinking there are only two avenues to get that on the ballot, either the citizens initiative or the city commission can vote to do that. Is that, you all know that off the top of your heads?
That's correct.
Correct.
Honestly, in my opinion, I don't think this is a ballot initiative issue. I think the jurisdiction has already been laid out, as Richard explained. They already have been exercising their jurisdiction over members of the city commission on the board of CRA. So it's already a done deal. At this point, the only thing that I see that can happen is, Commissioner Matlow can say, well, we don't recognize your jurisdiction, then it goes to court, and then the courts will play it out. At least that's the way I see it. Any other questions? Max has another question. He says, is it true that the ethics reform passed in 2019 were the strongest ethics reform passed in the state of Florida? This is something that gets repeated a lot at City Hall, and wondering what our thoughts are about this claim. I would not call it the strongest in the state of Florida, but most definitely the strongest in the city of Tallahassee, because there really wasn't any enforceable ethics ordinances in the city of Tallahassee until the ordinance in 2014 establishing the board, and then the sweeping reforms that were passed 2 years ago in January. But that, Richard, can you answer that?
Yeah, I think if you look at the ethics packages that have passed, particularly in South Florida counties, where they have substantially more resources, when you have a population of 5 or 6 million people to support what your ethics activities, you're going to have a more robust system. They've got some pretty strong ordinances down there, as well as over in Duval or Jacksonville. They've got a pretty robust system. I think I would be hard pressed to say that ours are stronger than theirs. They cover some things we don't cover. We may cover, or we may address a couple things in a different way than they do. It's hard to say whose are the strongest, but there are certainly local governments in Florida who have had very comprehensive ethics packages in place for a number of years preceding the city of Tallahassee.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think the source of this was actually me. I made some comments before the city commission when we were trying to get this passed. And I made the direct comment, that I thought that perhaps this was the strongest ethics package in the state of Florida. And then Curtis Richardson picked up on that, and he said it is the strongest ethics package in the state of Florida. And frankly, I was delighted to have Curtis take full responsibility for this. The mayor also repeated that. We don't care who gets credit for it, but ultimately the package came from the coalition working in closely with the Independent Ethics Board.
Yeah, and part of this is that some of those ethics boards that were set up in South Florida came as a result of some really bad occurrences with their city governments to begin with. That was not the case with us.
At the time, but since we had the federal corruption trial,
well, we didn't know about it at the time.
That shows you that whether we have the strongest ethics ordinance in the state or not, there's more to be done.
Absolutely.
You don't stop there.
Any more questions? Well, if there are no more questions, we want to firstly thank you guys for being here. It is much appreciated to have your interest in ethics in the city of Tallahassee. We would like to reiterate that we are in full support of the ethics board and the lobbyist package that they put out there. We also believe that the ethics board deserves whistleblower protection. So to be able to extend whistleblower protection to people who come and bring ethics complaints before them. And also we believe that the city commission is remiss in their acceptance of the city attorney's opinion that they are not, they don't have to answer to the ethics board for any of their positions or statements or votes on the CRA and blueprint. The ethics board has this jurisdiction. They've been exercising their abilities and their right on this jurisdiction, and we support the ethics board continuing in this vein. Thank you for your time, and if you have any further questions, you can all reach out. Most of you know how to reach out to us individually, and we are available for you.
And if you want a recording of the press conference, just ask and I'll be happy to provide it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
all.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you much.